I now recognize Ms. Tenney for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas and Mr. Miller, and also thank you to Chairwoman Lofgren. I want to thank you, Administrator, for your service and for being here and for giving us your transparent answers on the operation of the important functions. And thank you again to Chairman Lucas. Congratulations. I know he's not in here now, but glad to see him back in action. And I just have for the sake of time, I just want to not give you an opening statement, but I really want to dive right in, Administrator. And I'm going to ask you a string of questions, and I just would appreciate a straightforward yes-no answer on these if you could. And my first question is, are you familiar with Arabella Advisors?
Arabella Advisors?
Arabella Advisors.
I am not.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR, Council's proposed rule entitled, and I quote, disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related financial risk, close quote, that's the proposed rule, which would require major federal suppliers to publicly disclose greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related financial risks, as well as set science-based reduction targets?
I am familiar with FAR.
Okay. This rule was proposed by DOD, GSA, and NASA, which collectively comprise the FAR Council. Did the EPA have any involvement, consultation, coordination, or otherwise in this rule?
We may have had a peripheral. We typically participate in all interagency processes.
So you didn't directly get involved with this, as far as you know?
Our agency could have.
Could have, but you didn't.
No.
You with your staff didn't. Okay.
I didn't personally.
Don't you think that as the Environmental Protection Agency, the premier agency, you should have had some kind of consultation in putting forth this rule on climate emissions, especially affecting major suppliers and entities all over the country?
I believe that our agency may have participated in interagency. I'm just answering you straightforward. I did not participate.
All right. Do you know if the Council on Environmental Quality was consulted?
I assume that they were because they're part of the interagency process, but as you know, that council's in the White House and I'm not, so.
Okay. Appointed by the President. The rule requires major contractors to have their climate targets validated by a company called Science Based Target Initiative, or SBTI for short. Are you familiar with SBTI?
I am not familiar
Okay.
with SBTI.
The EPA's website cites SBTI's criteria as a good rule of thumb for companies to align their emission targets with, so you may want to know who they are, because they're going to be actually doing some oversight on behalf of your agency and telling U.S. businesses who they need to align with. I mean, let me also, are you also, since you don't know SBTI, it is a British company, and its interests may not necessarily be aligned with U.S. national security interests. And I just want to say, so everyone knows, is on the same page, including you, I just want to inform you, SBTI is a private foreign company that both sets emission reduction targets and validates them for private companies for a fee. According to the EPA's website, this is the agency you run, the EPA's Center for Corporate Climate Leadership is a resource center for all organizations looking to expand their work in greenhouse gas measurement and management. It goes on to say that the center offers resources to help organizations conduct, assess, and reduce their Scope 1, 2, and 3 GHG emissions. From what you understand, and I've described for here, don't the Center and SBTI conduct some of those activities?
I am very familiar with the Center
Okay.
for Corporate Climate Leadership.
Okay.
So I'm very familiar with that organization, which I think, to your point, is a voluntary program that we run because the private sector asks for ways that EPA
SBTI is not, the proposed rule is not voluntary.
The Center for Corporate Climate Leadership is a voluntary program.
But this rule that I'm talking about is actually, is going to be, if enacted, is going to be mandatory. So I want to ask you, so between the center, which you're citing here, and the pre-existing voluntary relationships that you're talking about with GHG reporting, it covers 85 to 90% of all U.S. GHG emissions. Do you think the EPA could at least be compared in offering the services and activities the SBI does instead of SBTI, since as you're a U.S.-based government agency, not a private entity that's funded by outside donors to which have ties to have political ties?
We have a greenhouse gas reporting program.
My question, though, is do you think that, don't you think that we should go to the EPA versus going to this SBTI?
Well, I'm not negating that FAR group didn't come to EPA to consult with the EPA on the greenhouse gas reporting program that we already have in place. I think we have two, the greenhouse gas reporting program and the Center for Corporate Climate Leadership. Both could have fed into the FAR process, and that could have happened with senior leadership at
So-
EPA. I'm just not.
Let me,
familiar
yeah,
with
I'm
that.
about to run out of time, but this company is listed as the sole source. This is the sole source for getting this information. Don't you think that we should have choices and that we shouldn't have a politically charged and, you know, there's Arabella
I guess I
actually
reject
is
the premise that
sort of
we
an
don't
outside.
have choices.
Right.
I think you're.
Well, under SBTI and under the proposed rule, there isn't a choice. They must go to
Gentlelady's
this
out of time.
SBTI, and SBTI is actually funded by Arabella Advisors ultimately, which is funded by, for lack of a better word, left-wing political sources.
I will take a look into this because I just sort of reject the premise that we don't have choice. We have a number of programs that are well established that could have fed an interagency process, and so I don't want to negate.
I think I
that
agree with
didn't
you. I
happen.
think that you would reject
Thank you, but the gentlelady's
SBTI.
time has expired. Thank
I
you very
I
much.
appreciate your
Thank you.
testimony. Thank you.